Okay. I think we can begin.
Yeah, Priya is the host. She will be starting now.
Hello, everyone. Good morning from Boston. I'm Priya Bansode, and I am a host for today's lecture series. We have a topic related to Navayana today, and Navayana means new vehicle, and it refers to reinterpretation of Buddhism by Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. It is also called Neo-Buddhism and Ambedkarite Buddhism. So Ambedkar studied texts of Buddhism, found several of its core beliefs and doctrines such as Four Noble Truths and non-self as flawed and pessimistic, and then reinterpreted these into what he called as a new vehicle, Navayana. So in the Dalit Buddhist movement of India, Navayana is considered as a new branch of Buddhism, which is different from traditionally recognized branches of Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, which is considered as a foundational of Buddhist traditions. So it radically reinterprets what Buddhism is, revising parts of original Buddha teaching to be more concerned with the class struggles and social equality, taking into account. So Dr. Ambedkar wrote a book, The Buddha and his Dhamma, and this holy book of Navayana is followed by many Buddhists, Navayana Buddhists, and then generally called as Ambedkarite Buddhist and Neo-Buddhist as well. And while the term Navayana is most commonly used in reference to movement Ambedkar found in India, it is also used as a different sense to refer westernized forms of Buddhism. So with that information, I would like to welcome our today's ALS guest speaker, Mr. Mangesh Dahiwale, the Ambedkarite scholar and activist. And I would like to introduce Mangeshkar before I give it over to Mangesh. Mangeshji is that Mr. Mangesh was born in a town of Bhandara, completed his graduation in electronic engineering from VGTI, Mumbai University in 1996. After passing a UPS examination in 1998, he worked with the Ministry of Commerce, handling the desk of foreign trade with Latin America and trade policy. He quit the civil service in 2004 to follow his passion of Ambedkarite movement and Buddhism. He has traveled extensively in India to mobilize for social justice. He also traveled in USA, UK, France, Japan, Korea, and the list goes on. To spread awareness about Ambedkarite and Buddhist movement. He has initiated several forums to serve the community such as IADF, BBN, etc. He writes extensively on topic of caste system, Indian constitution, Buddhism, and thoughts of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. He wrote a book, Thinking Navayana Way. He has produced 15 documentaries on various Buddhist sites in India. He works as a business consultant and currently spends his time between Vijayawada and Nagpur. He has also helped to design a course on socially engaged Buddhism for Pune University. He's a board member for Ambedkar Center in North Maharashtra University. He has an executive member of International Network of Engaged Buddhism in Thailand. And today's series, Mr. Mangesh is going to talk about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and Buddhism for the modern world. Maheshji, please take it away.
So Priya, should I begin?
Yes, please.
First of all, I'm very delighted to participate in this event and very happy to talk about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and the Buddhism for modern world. And before I begin to broach upon the content of the topic today, I thought it would be worthwhile to talk about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar briefly about his life, not very much in a very short period of time. Before we think about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's thoughts about Buddhism in modern world, it's imperative for us to understand what we can call in today's parlance the intentionality of the consciousness of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And what was the intention of the consciousness of Babasaheb Ambedkar? What did he want to do in his life? What was his mind like? And I think these are some of the questions which are very helpful for us to understand the topic today. So according to whatever studies I have done of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, and I might not be, rightly saying, whatever I read is the truth. But I think that if we consider the intention of Babasaheb Ambedkar, it was twofold. And one of the folds of Babasaheb Ambedkar's intention was to create a society which was a just society, which was a righteous society, which Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar called very beautifully as the kingdom of righteousness, or what in the Pali language can be called the Dhamma Rajya. So it is a society which is imbued with justice. And according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, justice is a bundle of threefold values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. You cannot separate these three values. So I think that was one of the folds of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's intentionality of his consciousness. The second fold that I can point out to is to deal with the cultivation of mind of the individuals, and the cultivation of the mind to the extent of the liberated mind or the free mind. And Babasaheb Ambedkar put it very, very beautifully in the Buddha and his Dhamma when he talked about the purpose of the Buddha's Dhamma in terms of creating the kingdom of righteousness and to cultivate or purify the mind of the human beings. So if we begin to look at the consciousness of Babasaheb Ambedkar himself, we can begin to see that Dr. Babasaheb's mind, the mind of Babasaheb was free. And there are plenty of examples that we can give to show that the mind of Babasaheb Ambedkar was a free mind. His mind was full of what you can say, equality. If we read some of the biographical episodes in his life, he was nothing but a man who practiced equality in his day-to-day life. His mind was full of what we can call the compassion or karuna. His mind was dignified, and all the time his mind was in the quest of justice. So we can see in the mind of Babasaheb Ambedkar all these qualities that he wanted to bring it out in the world. And I think that's a very important point to bear in mind to understand the consciousness of Babasaheb Ambedkar. His consciousness was not dogmatic. His consciousness was not blind consciousness. It was a reflective consciousness. It was a critical consciousness. So if we study the life and mind of Babasaheb Ambedkar, we can feel that his mind was always reflecting upon what's happening around him in terms of the human societies, in terms of the world, in terms of the politics of the times, in terms of the economics of the times, and in terms of all the dimensions that we can see which impinge upon the individual, anywhere. So his mind, his consciousness was reflective, his consciousness was critical, and it was not enough to have that critical or reflective consciousness. At the same time, Babasaheb's mind was engaged with the communities, was engaged with the societies. In other words, he was always in a dialogue with the people around him. He was always in communication with the people around him. So what Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was seeking in terms of freedom was not something in abstract. He was not seeking the freedom of objects. He was not seeking the freedom of the things, but he was seeking the freedom of both man and women. And that was what his mind was striving all the time. So if we look at further deep into Babasaheb's consciousness, we can see that his consciousness was engaged. His consciousness was active. And his consciousness itself was a vehicle for transformation of the people around us and the liberation of all. His consciousness was not defrayed. His consciousness was very focused on a particular community. The community which we call the oppressed community. His mind was very focused on that. And his focus was on their liberation. And he saw that in the liberation of these communities, the liberation of the world is a possibility. Because this is the community which has the hunger, which has the desire, which has the need for change, which has the need for transformation. And therefore, his consciousness was very critically engaged with one of the most oppressed of the communities of the world. Historically, the longest, a community which had suffered this worst form of oppression anywhere in the world. And we can begin to see that his mind was functioning that way. So if we critically examine Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's mind, we can begin to see these two strands coming forth. One of the strands was, of course, the formation of the society, which will be imbued with the value of justice, which will be imbued with the value of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And at the same time, striving for the liberation of the human mind, cultivation of the mind to the highest possible possibilities that exist in each of us, the potentialities that exist in each of us. Now, when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was thus striving for a society which is imbued with the values of justice, which is nothing but the bundle of liberty, equality, and fraternity, at the same time, he was striving to liberate the individuals. He found that there are two ways by which it can be done. And one of the ways by which it can be done is either through the law. You can constitute a society, you can construct a society either through law or through what he called morality or ethics. And he saw that the law is good, and he of course gave our country the highest law, which we call the Constitution of India. He of course gave that law to us. At the same time, he knew that the law is not for all, it's for the minority. What the society in general needs is the ethics or morality. And very surprisingly, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar found the source of ethics and morality in the religions, because he thought that the religions are not useless. They have certain function. The human consciousness is having this quality of what we can say to strive for the religious experience. We know that in one way or others, we are all moved by certain religious experiences, certain religious values, and certain religious qualities. So he saw in religion the source of the morality. And I think this is a very remarkable point that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar made. Today, people are talking about the secular morality, but we have no way to know how we can bring the social, the secular morality. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, having studied so many movements, so many revolutions, he found that the source of morality lies in the religion, in that dimension of human mind, which is having that religious bent, which is having that religious sort of inclinations. So he then compares with three dominant thoughts of the time. One of the thoughts like Marxist thoughts, which talks about religion being the opium of masses. And of course, the Marxists were responding to the Christianity, and whatever the Christianity has been in the Europe has been trying to make the human minds to think in a particular way. So he saw, particularly in his analysis, the Marxist saw that the Christianity, in terms of religion, is the opium of the masses. So that was one of the attitude towards the religion, to debar or to discard the religion as being something which numbs the minds of the people. And that might be true if we analyze particular religion. The second school of thoughts that existed was a group of people who talked about all religions are equal. Sarva dharma samabhav, as we say in India, that all religions are equal, that there is no difference between religions. And this Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar found not, in accordance with the truth. He found that not all religions are equal. The third school of thought that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has found is that all religions are bad. Whatever religions there are, they are bad. They always lead to conflict. They always lead to suffering. They always lead to the biased views. So that's kind of a third sort of a strand which he found, that the Marxists consider religion to be the opium of the masses. Some people believe that the religions are bad, and some people believe that all religions are equal. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, of course, did not subscribe to any of these views prevalent in society. He found that the religion is necessary for human beings, because there is something in us, in our consciousness, that strives for the religious experience. So having found this connection between the religion and morality or ethics, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar launched in the inquiry of what we can say the comparative study of religions. And of course, because he was writing in the context of religions, he has compared, he has gone deep into understanding the philosophy of religion, and particularly the philosophy of Hinduism. And in a very remarkable short book of philosophy of Hinduism, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about how Hinduism fails on the true norms that was so essential for the modern human beings, the norm of utility and the norm of justice. And when he analyzed the Hindu scriptures and the Hindu school of thoughts, he found that there cannot be justice in the Hindu philosophy, because it denies, the caste system denies what is called the fraternity. The caste system is a denial of equality. The caste system is a denial of liberty. And he very conclusively, because he had a very vigorous mind and he has a very vigorous sort of an intelligence, and he has analyzed the scriptures of Hinduism, and he has proved beyond doubt that there cannot be justice in the value system of Hindus and Hinduism. And the second thing he found, that because of the caste, which is being the heart of Hinduism, you cannot have the utility for the modern society. It makes the society inefficient because it depars the majority of the people from doing the productive activities, from doing some kind of a productive good to themselves and the humanity at large. So he has gone into depth comparing between the Buddhism and Hinduism. But as he was dealing with the religions of the time, he was particularly dealing with Christianity, with Islam, with Hinduism, and with Buddhism. And he was saying that, he said that I'm not going to do the comparative study of all this religion, but I'm going to give some points which will be helpful for us to determine what sort of a religion the modern human beings might need. So he was talking about what we can say the ethics and law. And he said that, the ethics has to be the heart of the religion. It cannot be the subsidiary or something which, can be detached or attached anytime. He said that the ethical system has to be the heart of any religious system. And he found that the God-centric religion or the theistic religion has this triangular piece of morality where the relationship between the two human beings is mediated by the God. And therefore, he found that kind of ethical system not in accordance with the modern world. And he said that the humanity, the morality has, the natural sort of an attitude towards the fellow human being. It doesn't have to be mediated by any third party. His piece of ethical system was confined not with this triangular arrangement of ethical system, but it has to do with relationship of one human being with that of another human being. So the second thing that he found, that the religion has to be compatible with what we can say science. He said that if the religion is not in accordance with science, then it is going to cause a big problem. It will make the religions ridiculous in the face of the scientific discoveries. The third thing that he wanted to see in a religion was that the religion should not ennoble the poverty. It should not tell that the poor, it's okay to be poor. Because he found that kind of an attitude in the religion to keep the poor people in their poverty without any hope is the mockery of the humanity. And the third thing he found, has to be in the religion is the quest for democracy. And in a way, by bringing these four factors, he found that the Buddha's Dhamma is in accordance with all these four conditions of being morality as the heart of it. He says that in Buddhism, the morality, if the Dhamma is nothing but morality, the morality is nothing but the Dhamma. It is not the wagon which can be detached or attached from the main engine. The Buddha's Dhamma, in the Buddha's Dhamma, the engine itself is the morality. And the morality is nothing but the relationship between the two human beings as to how they will relate with each other. And I think that's very important. And the second thing he found, that the Buddhism is in accordance with science. He says that the Buddha has given the flexibility, and according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, the quality of the Buddha Dhamma was that it was inherently flexible. And because of that, because Buddhism being inherently flexible, if something in Buddhism that doesn't accord with the scientific method, that can be discarded. And he was very confident in the Buddha's teachings that Buddhism accords with the scientific methods or with the scientific ways of looking at the things. And I'm going to go to that in the course of my talk. And the third thing is, the Buddha never ennobles the poverty. In fact, the Buddha considers poverty to be one of the sources of suffering. And he says that, having the condition of poverty is the source of suffering itself. And therefore, the Buddha has never ennoblized, the poverty. Now, having talked about these conditions, we begin to look at, why Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar chose Buddhism over other religious systems. It is not that Babasaheb Ambedkar was trying to castigate the religions, because he was somebody whose mind was not dogmatic. In other words, he was launching his inquiries into religions in a way that will bring out the elements of democracy, the elements of liberty, the elements of equality, the elements of fraternity, the elements of examining everything, according to the according to the urge of human consciousness. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has given us a very conclusive statements about what does the Buddha's Dhamma constitute of. And he followed the same line that the Buddha followed. As we know that the Buddha never encouraged anybody to follow his Dhamma blindly. It is not some kind of a dogma which is handed over by some prophet, or it is not something that has a divine sanction. The Buddha was a common man, and the Buddha was, he strived hard to liberate the common man. And of course, the Buddha was a free man. He was a man who had liberated himself. His mind was free. Despite of that, there was a deep humanity in Buddha. There was a deep sense of justice in Buddha. And in the Buddha and his Dhamma, Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the Buddha's Dhamma is nothing but the perfect justice. So what I'm going to do is, going to talk about some of the qualities of Buddhism in terms of how they accord with the modern man or modern women, particularly his ethical system. As I said, and as Babasaheb Ambedkar has analyzed, that the Buddha's, the ethics is the heart of Buddhism itself. If there is no myth, if there is no Sila, there is no Buddhism. If there is no, a definite statement on how one human being is going to relate with other human beings, the Buddhism, we can say that the Buddhism is not there. And I found this is very profound in the scheme of Babasaheb Ambedkar, the way he has understood the Buddha's Dhamma. Now, when we talk about of Buddhism, that was a time when Buddhism was challenged even within the traditional Buddhist countries, like Myanmar. The Buddhist country has been veering towards what we can say Marxism, and Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking to the international audience that we can definitely sketch what is called the social and political philosophies out of Buddhism. And he says that if we can begin to find out the social and economic and political theories out of Buddhism, that will create such a society which we cannot imagine. And that was what he was striving all his life. And therefore, Babasaheb Ambedkar's analysis of Buddha Dhamma is so essential, not only for the Buddhist in India, but Buddhism throughout the world, as to how we can make sense of the Buddha's teachings today. So, as we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar was a very, very vigorous reader of the Buddhist texts. And he has been studying Buddhism since his Columbia days. Before that, even before going to Columbia, we have now evidence that Babasaheb Ambedkar was very deeply influenced by the Buddha's teachings. And whenever he was studying, he was rigorously studying the Buddha's Dhamma. We also know that he was a scholar of Pali, and we also know that Babasaheb Ambedkar could read the original Pali texts, and he has attempted the dictionary of Pali in 4 languages, and he has left us what is called the grammar book of Pali, and he has extensively read on the different teachings of the Buddha. So his way was in accordance with the Buddha's way to examine everything, and the Buddha taught to examine everything, never take anything on its face value. He says that don't accept anything because it is handed over by tradition. Don't accept anything because it is in fashion. Don't accept anything because it is told by somebody whom you trust. Don't believe something because it accords with your thinking. Don't believe something because it can be logically established. He says that when you examine itself, you yourself examine it so deeply that you begin to find out whether it's beneficial to you and beneficial to others, it's beneficial to both, then only you act upon it. And I think that's a very beautiful way that Babasaheb Ambedkar has examined the Buddha's teachings. He has examined the Buddhist texts. Studying Buddhism is not easy. Examining Buddhism is not easy because over the period of time, as Babasaheb Ambedkar has said, that the Buddhism has become the part of the oceans of culture. Now the Buddhism has become the integral part of the Chinese culture or Japanese culture or Thai culture, you name it. The Buddhism has become the parts and parcel of this culture. And it's not easy to study Buddhism, through a lens of what we can say the Chinese Buddhism or Thai Buddhism or Korean Buddhism or, any Buddhism based on, nationalistic thought. So what Babasaheb Ambedkar did, he went to the Buddhist scriptures itself. He went to study what we can say the earlier Buddhist text, like in the Pali text. And as I told you, Babasaheb Ambedkar was the master of Tripitaka. He has gone into depth and he tried to, reconstruct, some of the teachings. He wanted to bring out some of the, aspects of the Buddha's teachings that can be relevant to the modern human beings. And he has done it so beautifully. If we begin to read the Buddha and his Dhamma, if we begin to read some of the beautiful papers that Babasaheb Ambedkar has written on Buddhism, we begin to get a glimpse of how profoundly Babasaheb Ambedkar has brought those beautiful, social and political and economic theories out of the vast ocean of the Buddhist texts. So I think that's very important that we begin to, when we are talking about, Babasaheb Ambedkar or his vision and mission in terms of forming a society based on liberty, equality, and fraternity, and something that will enable the human beings to free their mind. If Buddhism is anything, it is nothing but, the quest to free the mind. And Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking about the quest for freedom of mind as early on in 1936, where Babasaheb Ambedkar, at the end of his very profound speech, Which Way Liberty, he quotes the Buddha and he says that, I'm going to leave you with one of the teachings of the Buddha. That's in 1936. Quoting Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Babasaheb Ambedkar says that, be your own light. Do not depend on anybody for your liberation. Your liberation lies in your own being. There is nobody who is going to come and liberate you. The liberation of each one of us lies in our own hands, lies in our own efforts, in freeing our minds. And in that beautiful speech, Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about the freedom of mind. And he says that of all the freedom, what is important is the freedom of mind. And how does that freedom of mind happen? He says then when one begins to realize the profound way by which the world works in terms of the paticca samutpada, in terms of the cause and effect, that nothing in the world is sanatan, that nothing in the world has having this prime substance that everybody is trying to find out. He says that the reality is relational. That we are all interdependent on each other. The human beings itself are interdependent. There is nothing independent in the world. If anything is independent, it cannot simply exist. If anything is permanent, it cannot simply exist. That is not how the reality functions. There is no prime substance. There is no prime mover. There is no prime cause. Everything comes out into existence depending on the causes and conditions. And the human mind, if it inquires into it, we can begin to know the causes and conditions of each and everything. And the person who is having this mind of examination, the person who has this mind of knowing the causes and condition is ultimately the free mind. The mind is not dominated by any egoistic thinking. The mind is not dominated by anything that has to do with certainty. The mind is always thinking in very, evolutionary term, examining everything. And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, that the Buddha asks us to understand the facts of life instead of believing in the theories that have been handed down to us. So the Buddha's quest begins with understanding, grappling with the facts of mind, facts of life that happens around us, the political facts, the sociological facts, the cultural facts, the facts related to our relationship in our families, in our communities, in our nations, and so on and so forth. So you see, we begin to see that when we look at Buddhism from the perspective of Babasaheb Ambedkar, the way he examined into the Buddha's teachings, and he didn't change anything. Isn't it? It's not that Babasaheb Ambedkar is trying to, found out, new religion. Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the days of Mahatma is over. The days of prophets are over. We cannot have a new religion to suit suit the modern human beings. We have to do with the existing religion. We have to find out in the existing religions this processes that can make these societies ethical society. Now that brings me down to the role of intelligence in Buddhism, and in one of the very profound suttas, having discussion with his own son, the Buddha has given this very beautiful method that we can call today the reflective morality. So what the Buddha taught his son in terms of how they can cultivate morality is to keep the mind like a mirror, and the mirror has a quality of reflecting back. So our mind should be always reflecting back, on what is happening around us. And whatever we experience in the world, it is reflecting in our mind. And sometimes our minds are dull. We don't reflect back. Sometimes our minds are biased. Sometimes our minds are egoistically colored. Sometimes our minds are colored by our own dogmatism. And whatever we reflect back, it is not in accordance with what is needed. It might not be a right action in the world. So what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, that in terms of the reflective morality, and what the Buddha talks in terms of what the method of Paccavekkhana, it's like this, that reflecting back. So whatever we reflect, whatever we experience in terms of the social reality, political reality, our relationship with other people, we reflect back on us as to whether what we are doing through our body, what we are speaking through our speech, what we are thinking in our minds, whether it's beneficial to me, whether it's beneficial to others, and whether it's beneficial to both. And if it is beneficial to all, we cultivate that kind of an action. If it is not beneficial to us, if it is not beneficial to others, if it is not beneficial to both, we discard that action. And that's where the role of karma comes, because that's what is the karma according to Buddhism, as to how we act in the world, isn't it? And the karma has a relationship with intention, from which I began my talk. What was the intention of Babasaheb Ambedkar? How did he act the way he acted in the world? What kind of the rigorous processes of mind that he carried out so that he can make a dent on the world. In other words, how he himself became the instrument of the transformation of the world into more better society, into more, in the positive moral order. Of course, I'm borrowing all these terms from Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. So one of the key elements of Babasaheb Ambedkar's analysis of Buddhism was his vision of Prabuddha Bharat. And we know that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was not religious, religious fanatic. He talks very, very, very beautifully about nationalism. He says that, the nationalism is in terms of the national sentiment, is important to rotate the wheels of democracy, like representative government, like constitutional morality, constitutional law, and so on and so forth. But our aim is not to create what is called the fundamentalistic nationalism. So whenever we are talking about Prabuddha Bharat, we are talking about the vision that is enshrined in the Constitution of India, that is a vision of country which is based on liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, and the dignity of human being. And in his conversation with M.B. Chitnis, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar says that my Buddha and his Dhamma is completely accordance with the Constitution of India. You cannot find any contradiction between the Constitution of India and the Buddha and his Dhamma. And I think that's very remarkable of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar to talk about Prabuddha Bharat, to have a vision of a country, in terms of its law. And we know that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has given us the best constitution, but he also talked about the constitutional morality. He also talked about, how the people should respect the constitution, the various organs created by the constitution. And what we see in our country today is the complete disregard for what we can say the constitutional morality or the constitutional ethics. So having talked about the Buddha's Dhamma in terms of a means to make this country into an ethical democracy, or to use the word, it is not a proper word to use. These days, some of the scholars are using this word called what is called the spiritual democracy. One of the scholars in America, Stephen Rockefeller, who has studied, he has written a thesis on Dewey, and he's a practicing Buddhist, and he's trying to talk to people about how the fractured American people can be integrated through the educational system, where we can integrate what he calls the spiritual democracy. And he doesn't talk about Buddhism, but he is talking about Buddhism in indirect ways as to how it can create a kind of an ethical society. And he has articulated his vision for America in terms of the spiritual democracy. In the Indian context, we can articulate in terms of what Babasaheb Ambedkar would call the Nibbanic democracy, the democracy that strives for the highest good of the community, the democracy that strives for the highest good of the human beings and the individuals. So whenever we talk about Babasaheb's vision for the modern human beings, it's very important for us to realize some of the things that Babasaheb Ambedkar has brought into play. One of it is the rigorous examination of everything. There is nothing beyond examination. He says that even the religious ideas has to be put through the examination, through that rigorous examination. There is no idea which is sacred. There is no idea which is Sanatan. There is no idea which cannot be examined. And I think once our minds are operating in this way, that openness, not to accepting anything on its face value, but to examine everything with vigor and rigor, then we begin to see that the freedom of mind starts, being, cultivating in our own being. So the rigorous examination of everything. Second thing is how we can bring the morality, how we can spread the religion. And he says that the Buddhism is not religion. He says that Buddhism is something higher than the religion. It teaches the religion what is lacking in them. And he's somebody who won't make statements without being responsible. So whenever he's saying something, he's very responsible. He won't say something because he wants to please us. Sometimes he will talk bitterly, but it doesn't mean that he has bitterness in his heart, because sometimes we have to do it in order to awaken the minds of the people. And whenever Babasaheb Ambedkar is talking about examining the religions, he's saying that there is nothing in the humanity, in the human experience, which cannot be examined. He says, don't accept anything on its face value. Don't accept anything because it is handed over down by the tradition. Don't accept anything because our forefathers have been following it. He says, examine it deeply, and only when after examining it deeply, when you find out that it's beneficial for you and it's beneficial for others, it's beneficial for both, then only you cultivate that kind of a mental state, those kind of the emotions that are so much vital for the world today. And when we do that, when we train our minds like that, a stage comes when we become a true democratic human being, when we become a true free human being, when we become a true equal human being with a sense of justice. We cannot tolerate injustice. We raise our voice. We act in a way that will reduce the injustice in the world itself. So when Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking about, he was talking about in the community context. He says that sometimes he was talking in terms of the community context. Sometimes Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking in the national context, and sometimes Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking in the international context. So when he was talking about the national context, he was saying that this filthy water of Hindu religion, the caste system, is flowing also in our own localities. And he's saying that our community itself is now at a danger of dividing into the class, because some of the people are becoming richer, some of the people are becoming middle class. So how do we break barriers between the people which are now going to be divided into classes, and people are already divided into caste? He says that the Buddha or the Buddha's teaching can become a solvent to dissolve all these differences that comes between the two human beings. If Buddha's Dhamma is anything, it is the solvent, which breaks the barriers between the human beings, irrespective of their nationality, irrespective of their religions, irrespective of their caste, irrespective of their genders, and it strives to create one ideal humanity, which we can see in the ideal of the Buddhist Sangha. And that was what the ideal of the Buddhist Sangha that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, had before him. He said that if we want to create an ideal society, for example, a democratic society, we have to strive to create that ideal. And he said that the Buddha had tried to create the picture of the ideal society in the Buddhist Sangha. And he said that the Buddhist bhikshus are not like the sadhus. They of course have to be very intelligent. They of course have to be very talented. They of course have to serve the society. And we have seen that in the Buddhist history, the Buddhist monks have played this role of serving the society. You go to Sanchi and you see the entire irrigation system set up by the Buddhist monks. You go to the Sri Lankan and the Thai before they modernized. The Buddhist monasteries were the places where the students got education. You look at the Buddhist history. The Buddhists were the first in the world to set up the big universities. Not one or two. Many Buddhist universities. Nalanda, Takshashila, Vikramshila, you name it. Isn't it? The Buddhists were the first to set up the system of colleges in the world. And that's how the Muslims learned the scientific methods and the system of education from the Buddhists in Afghanistan. And the latter, when the Christian world came in contact with the Islamic world, they borrowed these twofold teachings of the Buddhist, rigorous methods of arguments, rigorous examination, by the way of telling something to you, the shunya is a very profound concept. It's a very abstract concept to even think of. And the Buddha has conceived this idea of shunyata, isn't it? And according to the historical research, the Buddhists were the first to use the symbol of shunya as a mathematical concept. Had there been no conceptualization of shunya, where would be mathematics today? Isn't it? And some of the scholars are now arguing that if we look at the way the Buddhists rigorously examined everything, they had developed the methods of what we can say the recursive methods of arguments. You pick up Nagarjuna's books, the way he examines everything. You pick up Dignaga's analytical works. You pick up Dharmakirti's profound work, and we begin to see the methods into play. They didn't accept anything because it is written in some scriptures. They discarded the Shabda Praman, Veda Pramanya. They said that we are not going to believe anything that has been handed down by the books. They said that we will believe anything if it is tested by the experiments. If it is ascertained by the rigorous logic, if there are the evidences of establishing something. So what I'm going to do today is talk about some of in the final analysis. I'm going to talk about a few concepts of Babasaheb Ambedkar that has been absent in the historical Buddhism, and that's what led to the downfall of Buddhism historically. One of the things is this, that we can continuously find out the strong relationship between what is called the practice of untouchability and how the Buddhists were castigated by the Brahminical systems. The Brahmins used to address the Buddhist monks as the untouchables. And Babasaheb Ambedkar has gone into a very extensive, deep analysis of these sociological facts, and the new research is showing that the practice of untouchability, which has been imposed by the Brahminical value system on the Buddhists, the result of that is the practice of untouchability. But one of the lacunas that we had in the Buddhism was the lack of Dhamma Diksha. There was a Sangha Diksha, but there was no Dhamma Diksha. So for the modern people today, it's very important for us to commit ourselves to this ideal of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Because if we do not commit ourselves to these ideals of freeing ourselves, and the totally free human being is the Buddha, or the community which is totally democratic, totally free, equal, and fights for justice, that is Sangha. We have to commit to the Buddha and the Sangha, and at the same time we have to commit ourselves to the method, to the practices by which we can realize the highest possible potentialities within us, that is to be enlightened, and the highest possibilities for the society to become the just, equal, and free societies. So I think one of the greatest contribution of Babasaheb Ambedkar in the domain of Buddhism that we can see happened on the 14th October 1956, when he gave us the Dhamma Diksha. He handed over the responsibility to us, and he told that he is not the Mokshadata. Nobody can free us. There is no higher law which is going to free us. The freedom of our mind lies in our own hands. That's what the Buddha taught. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar taught. That is what is captured in these very few beautiful three words: Atta Deepa Bhav, be your own light. So having that commitment to the Buddha Dhamma is very important. Buddha Dhamma and the Sangha. To break away from the value system which doesn't regard human being as the human beings. it puts you in a position where the cats and the dogs and the pigs are better than you, isn't it? But not you, because according to their value system, according to their caste system, according to Manu, the people of India, the 54% of the Shudras or the untouchables are not even in the fold of the Varna. You see, so when Babasaheb Ambedkar had this tremendous optimism, he said that once the people, the backward classes and the untouchables, when they recognize this machination of Brahminical Hinduism, they will strive hard to free themselves from it, and they will only choose Buddhism. And that's what he was telling to the Buddhist countries, that they should make efforts to bring back the Buddha's Dhamma back to this country. So one of the most important things that Babasaheb Ambedkar has done for the modern human beings is to tell them that there is a conscious need. There is a need of having that conscious intention to be free human being, to strive for the society which is free society, and to commit to the method of the Buddha, which never supports violence, which creates the beautiful societies without violence. And that is what the Buddhism has done throughout the history. It has humanized the world. It has been a process that has humanized China, Japan, Sri Lanka. India was like, what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, in the dark ages before the advent of the Buddha. And Buddha brought the light in this country. And we know that the history after the Buddha is the history of glory. Isn't it? The Buddhism gave, Ashoka gave this country the script, the very language. Had it not been for Ashoka, where would it be? Where would be the Indian history? Isn't it? The material history of India begins with the artifacts left by Ashoka. Isn't it? Had it not been for the Buddhist kings, we wouldn't have any sense of history. Isn't it? Buddhist history is nothing but the people's history. It is not the history of the 3 or 4% of the people. It is the history of the total humanity in our country. So, Dhamma Diksha is very important. Second thing that Babasaheb Ambedkar has done is to bring back the social and political aspect of the Buddha's teachings, and which is very important because the Buddhist countries were going in the grip of the communism. And Babasaheb Ambedkar said that if we study the Buddhist scriptures, we can find the social and the political theories. And he himself has attempted to create social and political theories by comparing Buddha with the Marx. And if we grapple with that text, the Buddha or Marx, we begin to see how the path of the Buddha is more conducive to create the socialistic society without shedding a drop of blood. So, constructing the social and political philosophies, he also tried to find out the ways to organize the Buddhists in the modern times. And we can see his way of organizing the people at the grassroots through various panchayat, Buddhist panchayat, on the national level. And he was totally involved in what is called the World Fellowship of Buddhists. He was the part and parcel of the World Fellowship of Buddhists in 1950s. He also asked us not to become dogmatic. He said that examine everything. There is no idea which cannot be examined. There is no sacred idea. There is nothing Sanatana in the world. Everything is subjected to examination and everything is subjected to change. And therefore he says that examine everything, including the Buddha's Dhamma. Not only that, he said, you examine my presentation of the Buddha and his Dhamma. He said that don't accept the Buddha and his Dhamma just by its face value, because I have written it. He said, you examine with your own mind, the Buddha and his Dhamma. One of the important things that Babasaheb Ambedkar has done is to bring Buddhism in communication with sociology, with politics, with cultural studies, with economics, and with other social and spiritual movements. When he talked about the comparative study of the religions. And one of the aspects of Babasaheb Ambedkar's vision that is very important for the modern Buddhist today is to have this internationalism. Never lose the possibilities of getting connected with the Buddhists from all over the world. You imagine China, having this 25% of the world population. India, now has surpassed the population of China. And the Chinese culture is imbued with Buddhism. It is said that there is no house in China where there is no Avalokiteshvara or Amitabha. Isn't it? Same with the Japanese country. Their base of the culture has been imbued with Buddhism. So now the Buddhism is coming back to the West. The Buddhism is now studied in the laboratories as to how the mindfulness have this profound effect on the human mind. And a lot of people, as I was talking about Rockefeller, the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, he claimed himself to be a Buddhist monk. And when he was at a dying stage, he wanted to spend his time in Japanese monastery where he had practiced Buddhism. He wanted to go to his teacher, Kobun. So you see, we as a Buddhist in India, we can never lose sight of this international development. In the best scheme of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's, methods, we have to always try to find out the ways by which we can communicate. Now, I have been traveling all over the places, and I can tell you that there is no place like India where the Buddhism is growing like a wildfire, isn't it? And the Buddhism in India is young. If you go to any vihar, there are thousands of vihars in Maharashtra. Hundreds and hundreds of Buddha vihars are coming up in different parts of the country. And people are reading Buddha and his Dhamma. People have been practicing. People have been trying to dig deep into Babasaheb's mind to understand what's happening, how to practice the Buddha Dhamma. And that process is going on. And we shouldn't be, in a haste. We shouldn't try to force something because it's an organic development. Once people begin to grapple with the ideas, it takes some time for them to realize. And as a community, as my experience goes, as I travel all over the places, I can see people, studying the Buddha in his Dhamma, trying to understand the Buddha in his Dhamma, and it's not an easy book to understand. There are many layers of understanding. There are many ways by which we can derive a lot of meaning out of it. We can derive many strategies out of it. How we can mobilize our society, how we can impress upon other people as to where their emancipation lies. So I think one of the important things is for us to go back to Babasaheb, to go back to his vision, to go back to his writings and speeches, whatever he has left behind. Engage with it. Engage with the mind of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Engage with what I said in the beginning, the intentionality of his consciousness. Isn't it? In other words, how we can become the very Bodhisattva who tried to liberate ourselves. And that's the ideal before us. Isn't it? In the Buddhism is the scheme of things where each one of us, if we make efforts, we can become the very Buddha ourselves, provided we make efforts. And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar has taught us, to make efforts. Never get pessimistic, never get lethargic. Have this sound mind to explore everything. And once that will to freedom is awakened in us, there is no stopping back. And when that will to awaken, is awakened in many of us, it creates a society that has the potential to emancipate the larger humanity. And that has what happened in the Buddhist history. That is what has to happen if India has to survive in the future, if India has to become the enlightened India. There is a lot more I can say, but I thought today I would stop here and I would open the forum for any discussion, any comments, or any critical examination from any of you.
Thank you so much, Mangesh ji. We are open for questions. But before starting the question, I would like to say that this lecture series is being brought up by Boston Study Group, and Boston Study Group is registered under 501c3 as a nonprofit organization dedicated towards justice and equality society. And we have a BSG Digital magazine, and the link for that has been sent on a chat group if you would like to check. And we should proceed with the questions if anybody has.
Mangesh bhai, good evening. This is Banu.
Good evening. Yes, Banu.
Yeah, Mangesh bhai. Actually, quick question. Actually, I don't know. I joined little late, but still I have one question on, as you mentioned, like connecting internationally with international Buddhist. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is something I wanted to discuss. So at least I have interacted with multiple, like Vietnamese, Thailand, Sri Lankan. I think, can somebody go on mute? I think.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So during my interaction with them, they are not very much connected with Ambedkar's Buddhist philosophy, and but they have a great respect on Ambedkar for the revival of Buddhism in India. Okay, so the main thing is, how do we consider that they have different ways of practicing, right? Especially the way they chant and the way they believe on the rebirth. Okay, these are something completely different than what we think in the Buddha and his Dhamma book. So how do we consider, like, how do we take this globally? Like, if you want to consider Buddhism and interact with global countries, how this rebirth can be considered? Do we need to accept their belief, or do we need to give some space to their belief? And how can we come to some common space on this subject? Can you share your thoughts on that?
See, basically, when I talked about Buddhism has become the has become involved with what is called the oceans of culture. Sometimes it's very difficult to separate the cultures from Buddhism, isn't it? Because before the Buddhism entered into these countries, they already had certain cultures, and Buddhism is a very flexible, I would say, a system of liberation, which seamlessly merges with various cultures. And sometimes it might happen so that we begin to take the culture as the Buddhism itself. So there are cultural practices, and which are particular to particular countries. And for example, if Buddhism comes in the West, which will be, clad in the Western languages, Western metaphors, and so on and so forth. And therefore, it's very difficult to engage with the cultures. Now, what we can engage with is, as I said, with the Buddhist scriptures, isn't it? And that's what we have to do. We have to look into the Buddhist scriptures as to what the Buddha has talked in terms of the karma and rebirth. Now, I was talking about the karma as the ethical action in the world, isn't it? As an action of the body, speech, and mind to transform the world for the better, in order to create the moral social order. And there is, the complete evidence in the Buddhist text, which accords with what Babasaheb Ambedkar has taught us. Like, for example, the Buddha says in Pali, Kammuna Vattati Loko. Now the world, and the world means the world of human beings, is rotated by the action. And the Buddha says, Chetna aham kamma vadami. Intention is what I call the kamma. And then you talk about the akushala karma and the kushala karma, the moral ethical action and the immoral action, the moral action and the immoral action. Now, what is the basis of the immoral action and the moral action? It is your reflection. It's your mindfulness. It's your understanding of the mind, isn't it? As to how do you weigh what is ethical and what is non-ethical, what is moral and what is immoral, and how do we know something is moral or immoral? The Buddha is very categorically saying, if that action is beneficial to you, beneficial to others, and benefit to both, that's a moral action. If it is not benefit to you, if it is not benefit to others, it's not benefit to both, that's an immoral action. That's an immoral karma. So very clear. And it's not that this ideation of the karma is done by Babasaheb Ambedkar, himself. There is a strong evidences in the Buddhist scriptures to prove the point. Now, the rebirth is very problematic, because how can you have a rebirth without a soul? Because when the Buddha examined his experiences, he found that there is no substance. Everything is a process. Isn't it? The reality doesn't have some kind of a prime substance, something which never changes. There is no Atma. So what the Buddha discovered is the Paticca Samutpad. The reality is Paticca Samupanna. It's a relational reality, isn't it? So whenever we talk about the relational reality, we cannot talk about the rebirth of a substance. What we can talk about is the patterns, the recurring patterns of something, Punarbhava. Now in the nature, we see the recurring patterns. For example, if you sow the seed of a mango, you are going to reap only the papaya. Isn't it? So there are certain patterns which are taking place all the time. Isn't it? They are recurring again and again. Isn't it? There are patterns due to evolution. We can see that the evolution has a certain pattern. And we know that one of the ways by which we can talk about mathematics in terms of the study of patterns. isn't it? So there are various patterns which are happening at the macro level, which are happening at the macro levels. So what the Buddha talked in terms of becoming again and again is the recurrence of the same patterns, which we can see everywhere, the recurrence of the same patterns. You see, so for example, if the human species are going to give birth to the human species, the mango seeds are going to give birth to the other mangoes, like that. So I think there are different ways by which we can understand the rebirth. The Buddha, of course, doesn't talk about the rebirth of a soul, because there is no possibility of a soul, because there is nothing in the world, there is no substance in the world which is independent of everything. It cannot just exist. The impermanence is the fact of life. The interrelationship is a fact of life, isn't it? So that's the way the science has come into being, understanding the relational reality, understanding the cause and effect, isn't it? So you see, we study deeply the Buddhist text. We study deeply the Buddha and his Dhamma. We look at the teachings of Babasaheb Ambedkar very deeply, examine them very deeply, understanding our experiences. Even if there is a rebirth, for example, what is the use of it if we are not today, if we are not living the ethical life today? Isn't it? So these are tricky, complex questions, and there is no definite answer. But on the basis of these texts, on our own examination, we can take example of science in order to understand certain things, isn't it? Otherwise, we will land up in a dogma if we are harping the tone that the same thing is going to come into being again and again. And there is a very beautiful way of resolving. Whatever being is born, nacha so nacha piyayo, not the same, not the different. Now I grow up from a child to an adult. Now, am I the same or different? Who am I? Am I the same like I was born to my parents, and now having reached to adulthood, am I different? The answer is it can lead to the linguistic hodgepodge. So the Buddha escapes from it, saying nacha so nacha piyayo, not the same, not the different. Sometimes we can get trapped in the linguistic, in the trap of language. Sometimes we can get trapped in the concepts of in the conceptual word. The Buddha says, watch the language. Sometimes the spiritual language can be so flamboyant. The religious language has got that quality to make us believe something, which we generally might not believe. So the Buddha says, watch even the language of the scriptures, isn't it? So dealing with other people, I think you stand on your own firm grounds, isn't it? We know that we should have a faith in Babasaheb Ambedkar, because he has demonstrated for all of us the possibilities of emancipation, isn't it? What kind of other evidence we need? So sometimes it happens in the communities, we get swayed by Buddhism of this kind or that kind, the Buddhism, this Buddhism and that Buddhism. I would say that let's first firmly ground ourselves in how Babasaheb Ambedkar has taught Buddhism to us. Otherwise, there is a tendency to get lost in the schools that are proliferating around us.
We have few more participants who would like to ask questions. Maybe we can start with Naresh ji.
Thank you, Mangesh bhai. Jai Bhim. Nice
Naresh
to
bhai.
see you.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you. It's very beautiful talk. Sometimes some of the things has to repeat actually, and you said very well actually that intention, and that's what actually I'm contemplating all the time. If somebody says what is the intention behind it, and I'm trying to teach my kids also, saying if somebody pushed you, what's the intention, bad or good, and was it intentional? Okay, my question is actually, I was reading something, and then the Buddha's Sangha was kind of a democratic, and Buddha was not the head of the Sangha.
Yeah.
So how was the whole process of the Sangha operating?
Yes, very beautiful question. Yes. You see, the Buddha was a very wise leader. The Buddha was not the head of the Sangha. He was not a dictator. He was a wise leader. And the Buddha has always recognized this quality of the human beings to lead themselves and lead others. If we can lead ourselves, that's the ultimate freedom, right? If we don't get swayed by other people, and their opinions, and we examine ourselves, and we are led by that light, which is dawned onto ourselves. So to lead oneself is very important, and the Buddhist Sangha is about creating that leaders which will lead themselves. And when the people came together in the beginning of the period of organizing the Sangha, of course, there was no rule like Vinaya for the first 20 years. Because the people were so enlightened, so wise that they know how to relate with each other. They know how not to gossip. They know how not to talk bad about each other. They know how to encourage each other so that they can be free. So then the Buddha had to devise certain processes that we can see. So for example, in terms of the parliamentary democracy, that of course the Buddhist Sangha was, in terms of the voting, in terms of if there is a conflict between the two members of the Sangha, how would they resolve it? They will appoint a court where a senior monk will officiate that court, and both the parties will, deliberate. And that's how they will try to resolve the matter. If they couldn't resolve the matter that way, then there will be voting. By the way of voting, the matter was to be settled. And if they found that some people have committed the crime, there was a punishment. If the monk has committed a crime of a theft or killing, they were immediately expelled from the Sangha. If they have committed the lesser crimes, they were asked to rehabilitate themselves, go away in some lonely place, and then again come back. So how did the Buddha organize the Sangha? The first thing the Buddha organized the Sangha is through recitation of the rules of good conduct. So the rules of good conduct in Buddhism are called the Patimokkha. So every 15 days, the monks will sit together and they will recite the rules of good conduct, Patimokkha, Vinaya. And then after reciting one rule, they will ask, has anybody breached this rule? Then you can suo say, oh, I did it. If you have not done it, if other person has noticed that you have done it, they will tell, sir, he has committed that. And then, if they have committed that, then if he accept is good, well and good. If they don't accept, then there will be an inquiry. And after the inquiry, after the examination, if it is found that the particular monk has committed, has gone against the rule of good conduct, they will be either expelled, they will be either given a chance to reform themselves and come back. Isn't it? Now, I think this process is very important. Now, imagine the constitution as the rule of Patimokkha or Vinaya. And imagine that, people have to be moral about that rule of, law. And Vinaya is nothing but the constitution of the Buddhist Sangha itself. Now, for us, it's very important for all of us who are in the Ambedkarite movement to talk about the good practices, good conduct. How, when we come together, operate ourselves? How do we conduct our meetings? These rules of good conduct are not just for the monastics, because Babasaheb's Buddhism is oriented towards humanistic Buddhism. The center of Babasaheb's way of, understanding Buddhism is human being, common man, me and you. Buddhism for all, not just for monastics, not just for a particular class of people. The Dhamma is same for everybody. So for today, I think it's a big question for us, all of us. How do we organize our assemblies whenever we meet in the Buddhist Ambedkarite context? How do we conduct ourselves? If we breach something which is not in accordance with the good conduct, if we backbite, if we do something immoral, how that can be brought into Sangha in a way that can be resolved in the best possible way, so that the Sangha remains a democratic. Democracy is a very deep concept in Buddhism. It doesn't just, comes to parliamentary democracy. It boils down to social and economic democracy. It boils down to moral democracy. It boils down to intellectual democracy. Isn't it? It's very deep. The way Babasaheb Ambedkar has thought about Buddhism is very deep, very rigorous. The tragedy is that We have not engaged with that aspect of Babasaheb Ambedkar with a great rigor, with a great vigor. So coming back to your point that, in our communities, we also have to institute mini democracies. Without those freedom within the communities, we cannot talk about the democracy at large. Without developing those kind of cultures within the communities, where we do away with these differences of caste, differences of class, differences of anything that separates us. If we do not cultivate those practices within our own communities, we have no moral right, as it were, to talk about the democracies outside. And that's why the individual is so important in Buddhism, because this democracy, Sangha, can become tried, a banal word, unless an individual makes an effort to really change it. So it's my responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility to really imbibe those values within us and, bring them back to the society, isn't it? So what I'm talking about in terms of the democracy in the Sangha is on many levels. In other words, how we can constitute our own groups into a democratic groups, how we can encourage the free dialogues, how we can encourage the cohesion within, how we can encourage everybody to have the voice of their own, examine every idea that is there in the group without any bias. So I think it's a process, it's I would say the processes which the Buddha instituted in terms of Patimokkha, which kept the Sangha alive for thousands of years. So does that satisfy you an ounce of your curiosity? Or
yes, Mangesh, definitely. And then there is more to that. So now I think at least got some pointers to go deeper into that one. So Mangesh, I have another question. It's bothering me for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
And then people, especially the monks, give very different answers. It says miracles. So Buddha was a monk, right? And then he had the same rules as the other monks.
Yeah.
So why the Buddha head it's not shaved, and then we show him the different than the other monks?
See, the Sangha that we are talking about is actually, is a very small part of the Sangha. The Bhikshu Sangha is a very small part. There was a Bhikshuni Sangha. There was a Upasaka Sangha. There was a Upasika Sangha. And the Buddha made no differentiation between the monks and the Upasakas. At the time of the Buddha, there were enlightened Upasakas and Upasikas and the Bhikshunis. Isn't it? Somehow patriarchy crept into Buddhism. Heretical views crept into Buddhism, and we see that the Buddhist Sangha, Bhikkhuni Sangha completely vanished. The Upasaka Sangha completely vanished. So it is said that when we say the Buddha is having hair, he also is the representative of the Upasakas and Upasikas. It's very difficult to put Buddha in the category of the monks, nun, Upasaka, and the Buddha is Buddha. Bodhisattva is Bodhisattva. You cannot put them in the categories. Like, which category we will put Babasaheb Ambedkar into?
Okay, so it's just the symbolic then.
Which category we'll say Babasaheb is monk or Upasaka? Who is he? He's beyond that. His mind has gone beyond all these distinctions. This worldly designation doesn't apply to the man whose mind is free. And as we have seen in the Buddhist history, that there were Upasakas and Upasikas who were free. In the Mahayana traditions, we will see Upasakas even teaching the monks and nuns. In the traditional countries, we will see that some of the Upasakas are so powerful, they teach the monks and nuns. So this distinction, whether monks, nuns, whether the Buddha was monk or Upasaka, who was the Buddha? Who was Babasaheb Ambedkar? So let's not enter into these designations and these categorizations. We focus on where we are supposed to focus, how we can free our minds. And to practice the Dhamma, it is not the essential condition to become a monk. The Buddha never said that if you become nun and monk and nun, you will become enlightened. The Upasakas cannot become monks and nuns. Nowhere it is said. It's very easy life for the monks and nuns because they have more time to practice, the more time to study, and the path is very easy for them. But for people like us who are involved in the samsara, we have so many worldly responsibilities. So I would say that becoming monk and nun is a fast track process. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thank you.
Very convincing. Thank you so much. We have Megha next with a question. Megha, please go ahead.
Thank you. So, hi, Mangesh.
Hello, Megha.
Question is like, I think we need to be very, very practical with our population and the jobs available in US. Like if you see 33 crore around population US has, and our population in India itself is 15%, around 21 crore. So it's not possible like everyone will be there. Entire population definitely we cannot shift, and we will be here in India majorly. And also like we are talking about Buddhism and all. Fact is we scheduled caste people, 15% people are facing casteism. Rest OBCs are not facing any casteism. They are the biggest population in country.
Right.
Then Savarnas are Savarnas. And even I have seen Muslims, even they also look at this as low only. So majorly 80% country is Hindu. They are happy Hindus. They are not facing casteism, which we are facing. So our problem is only our problem. It can never be their problem. So they have no reason to accept Buddhism. This is fact. And all over world now Indians have reached, and major population belongs to Savarn community. So if we are seeing our people are very less in all the countries. If you see Savarnas, they are more in all the countries. So it is not possible like we will move them and put our people at their place. That is never gonna happen. And next thing what I have noticed is like whatever Babasaheb did, people just want to do the same thing. He accepted Buddhism, he passed away in 1.5 months. Now what is happening at various stages are people are coming and talking about Hinduism or that Sanatan religion and what not about that all, and it is boiling their blood. Right. And after that, the person who is actually boiling their blood is definitely a guest, a person from a good family, protected family, is going away, and then village or other people, they will attack on someone who has arranged that program and all. Like if you see in Nanded now, one Mr. Akshay, he is killed. So how much it is correct being Buddhist? Do we really need to talk about Hinduism all the time? Because they are majorly everywhere. Like if I am working in IT, I have seen like 2-3 people were from our community. So what is the point in just attacking on them when they are very clear about their religion? They know like they don't want Buddhism. There is no need. It is our need. We faced problem. We wanted to get out of that religion. We came out. But now expecting from entire backward community, Mr. Rajendra Pal Gautam, who was one of the AAP minister, he has also come to this ANAS forum, and he was also saying like I will work on this and convert entire country as a Buddhism. But it is not their need. OBCs, their point is we are not Dalits, you are Dalits. We are not facing any problem in Hinduism. It is your problem. It is not my problem. They are very open about it. I'm talking about engineering graduates, well-educated people. So why we should put our energy in something which is actually not required, and they don't want it. When someone is saying no, it means it's a no. We need to understand it. So what we need to think about our community's protection. We know we cannot place everyone in US or any country. No, any country will even accept that. So why are people are not practical? They are telling about books and all. How it is possible? Like 1% people are also not in IT. So far, I'm seeing all our surnames in communicator to see like how many people are there in the offices. But our people are very, very less. So why can't we have that kind of Buddhism where we don't need to take the name of that Hindu religion at all? We are actually making them more famous. We are nowhere in their life. They don't want us. We want them to follow Babasaheb or Buddhism, but they are very happy in Hindu religion. We want them to give us equal respect. They don't want us at all. So there are some realities which we need to accept. And even our people are little dogmatic. They will be like, Babasaheb, Buddhism, Babasaheb. They will speak a lot and it will really boil their blood like anything. And after that, they will attack on someone from our community only. We are very thankful for laws, but that laws would be used when someone has completely lost.
So what do you suggest, Megha? What should we do?
I think we need to have our own way of expressing our thoughts. We need to be very, very assertive, like how we speak in office. If someone has not performed well or did a bad job, then also there is a way to speak. We should not use this Sanatan and Hindu religion name anywhere. We should not speak anything which will boil their blood. We should think about how we can make our community financially strong, protected. Our focus should be that much only. We don't need to worry about entire country, like they need to be Buddhist or OBCs. People are coming as a guest and they are telling like, we need to convince OBC. How they will get convinced? They don't want us. OBCs want only scheduled caste below them. They don't care who are above them. They are happy to see other Savarnas above them, but they don't want to see us above them. So this is fact, So putting lot of energy, now you see boys are very less in offices. The people who are working at good positions in all the offices, they're not facing any problem. They will be asking questions on Buddhism, this and that. But their problems are actually no problems. If you see people who are working at low pay jobs, they are facing the problems. People who are living in areas where our people are very, very less and other community people are more, if we will boil their blood by giving statements against their religion and all, it will really create problem for our people. We need to be
Megha, you want to say that we should stop doing all this?
I feel we need to be very assertive, very focused, very much to the point what we want.
So what do we want? Can you be more specific about what is your program? Because
we should only talk about Buddhism without using Hindu word, without using Sanatan word. Why we need to? We know that Buddha statues have been decorated and used in such a way, and they have used it as a Hindu god. They successfully suppressed Buddhism in the country. We know that. And now they are 80% above our head. So we need, like one person has come, they said like, we need to fight and get our statues back. And some people said, how can we take their statues back now? We are Buddhists. We want peace. We are not people to kill anybody. So our approach should be like, we should demand for the new Buddha Vihara, new statue. But what our people are also using that Hindu kind of sense, like Babri Masjid, it is ours, so we should get it back. Why we want used something back?
I think Megha, I'm sorry to stop you here. Because,
new ideas are missing.
Yeah, because I think we are digressing a lot. What I'm trying to say to you is, to have a correct vision of history is very important. Because without having the sense of history, we cannot have our movement to go forward. And to have the sense of history, there are two beautiful concepts. One is the revolution and counter-revolution, isn't it? And if we don't see that there is a counter-revolution against the community, if we do not do it, we will be trampled down. If we do not talk about the reality in a persuasive way, I'm not saying that we should be violent in talking. You see, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, for example, he was the only one member in the Constituent Assembly. And even in that, his singular speech, the first speech, he's being very critical of Nehru, who put forward the resolution. And yet he has this tremendous capacity to persuade the rest of the house. So what I'm saying is, the Buddhism itself gives you a lot of tools to be free. If you have listened to me carefully, I'm not saying that, we go and convert people. We are talking about the contradiction within, isn't it? When you are talking about our community, what are you talking about? Are you talking about one particular community, or you are talking about a scheduled caste community? Even within scheduled caste, there is so much of a contradiction of a caste. Now, the new contradiction that is arising in the community is that of a class. There is a definite middle class which has emerged because of the efforts of Babasaheb Ambedkar, and which is very, very cozy with whatever benefits they have got. So the point is, how we can use these processes, how we can use the Buddha's Dhamma in order to, resolve these contradictions. I'm not saying that, you go out with a sword and, try to occupy the places that have been hijacked by the Hindus. But to talk about this, it itself creates a doubt in the minds of the people. It is not that the Ambedkarite movement is a total failure. There are the sections within OBCs which are open to talk, which are open to learn, which are open to accept Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Had it not been for that openness within the movement to talk about these very sensitive things in a way, which will open up the minds of the people. It's a process which is going to take time. It's not going to happen in a day. Of course, we should be focused on the most dispossessed of the population. But if we focus, all our energies there, and if we stop this work of, educating people, we would be creating so many barriers for the communities. Sociologically, the scheduled caste are at the mercy of a lot of people, above us, as you said. So if you do not find a persuasive methods to transform the minds of others, a day will come when people will be slaughtered without having any support. Actually, I should not give you this example, but when there was this Maratha backlash against this, they were talking about ek Maratha, lakh Maratha, and they were engaging with some of our people. And our people said to them that, why do you raise the point of talking against the atrocities? So they came out with a solution for the march. They said that it will be a Mukha march. We will not raise any slogans there. So it is not that the consciousness of the others is not being, challenged. The caste system itself is a violent system of social structure. If we do not find the ways to challenge it, the structure of the caste system, we know that, it will create more violent cycles. So in a way, it's okay if you want to focus your energies on bringing, the economic progress to the communities. Well and good. It's beautiful. One should do it. We should have multi-pronged approach. Our needs are not one. Our needs are many. And let the other people do what they want to do, what they find best for them to do. There will be multiple responses because our needs are multiple. So for the social movement in India, it's very important to talk about the counter-revolution, to historicize, why these contradictions today, and resolve those contradictions for the future. So I think the different people have different energies. Like, for example, if your energies, if you want to train your gun on the economic upliftment of the communities, well and good. If somebody wants to contribute in the academic way, well and good. If somebody wants to contribute in talking about Buddhism, empowerment of the people, well and good. If somebody wants to do civil rights work, well and good. The violence is the part and parcel of the caste system. If we do not do anything about it, more violence, more killings.
What is my observation, Mangesh? So far, I have seen, like I went to our Buddha Vihara, where our children.
Mega, we will not take this much time because other people. See, wherever there is a contradiction, please try to resolve it. That is what the Buddhism is all about.
Okay,
through our action. If you go to Buddha Vihara, if you see some contradiction, try to find the way out, how to resolve the contradiction. Isn't it? That's what is the beauty of Ambedkarism. It is not the mute philosophy. It is not the dogmatic philosophy. It's the action-oriented thing. Because there are so many contradictions. If we begin to list them out, even one session will not be enough. There is a contradiction among the Shudras, the OBCs. You see, you meet the government officials, the OBCs, they are under so much of contradiction. And the contradiction is not bad.
Someone has written kindly. I think someone has written kindly ignored the question.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Govind. Mr. Govind, you go ahead. I'm dropping off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you so Mangeshji. It was a really good question and answer round, but we have many more to ask questions. And I would request everybody to give a brief introduction before they ask question. Venkatji, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Thank you, Priya. So, Mangesh, it's a wonderful, delight and treat to, really hear from Buddhism and, Ambedkar. So there's a lot of interpretations, but I think your lecture was really, really enlightening. How to make Dr. Babasaheb Navayana Buddhism to, current India, and so it was really good. I learned a lot. So just my thought. We just saw Mega, and we are discussing the challenge. I mean, I feel we use these wise people studied, and we have come to US and all that. We use these words, right? Like OBCs and SCs and 80% Hindus. This is all so wrong. Actually, the conversation is wrong. It's really bothers me that where is 80% Hindus? Who is Hindu in India, right? It's such a bogus, manufactured Hindu. First of all, who is Hindu? These OBCs is depending on which state you take. It's a 50 to I don't know what person in Telangana. Mangeshji, Mega. Just to let you know, in Telangana, 93% SC, ST, OBC minority population is 93%. And what we call Savarna is 7%. So the India, and then we have so much hierarchy in this, 32 castes in scheduled caste, and the bitter fights, and Mangesh knows, is an SC candidate you meet, the biggest enemy he has is, we have these two community, Mala Madiga. Yes. They won't get, enraged, but you talk about Mala Madiga, they will be getting more enraged. So this evil caste system has done so much damage to our Indian society. And as a wise people, as beneficiaries of reservation, as a beneficiaries of Indian democracy, constitution, and if we don't talk about these, structural violence that whole Indian marginalized face every day, who else will talk, right? We have to challenge. And as Mangesh said, it is a multi-pronged. Whoever in their capacity can correct this situation, I think we should do it. Yes, economic upliftment is very, very important. But at the same time, these deep-rooted inequalities to social, if we don't confront, if we don't challenge, who will challenge? So that's my comment. But more question towards Mangesh ji is, Mangesh, you told me that, I travel in India, I see Buddha viharas everywhere, as if, and I am finding it, except Maharashtra. Right, the fact we have to, confront with the fact. Please. You only said, right, we have to reason and all that, right? That's what I believe in. So, when Babasaheb, sorry, I'm taking a little time, Priya, but I'll conclude, please, okay? Please. So, when Babasaheb given the call for Buddhism, it was a wonderful suggestion. He said, people have to leave Hinduism, and 100% agree. And if we look at what happened in the past 65 years post Ambedkar, see, I believe in, Buddha also said, don't take what I said, go through your reasoning. Yeah. And you have to apply to current context and history, So after Babasaheb passed away, 65 years. And where is Hindu Buddhism in India, right? Except Maharashtra, I find it very difficult to find, and Telugu land, what happened? Now, yeah. I can boldly say this, 90% of educated Dalits practice Christianity in Telugu land. Right, Mangesh? You also know very well. So we passed a stage that, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not I'm a religious neutral, okay? but my ideas and life is more close to Buddhism, but I'm not religious, okay? So in this dilemma we face, even in United States, we have a big challenge, especially Telugu Dalit Christians, right? I mean, they put Christ and Ambedkar next to him.
I know, yeah.
Right? They all, I mean, that's how they whoever the Christianity came to them first, whoever embraced them, whoever they gave respect as a human, they embraced and they ran with them, right? I mean, that's what happened. And I have zero anything find wrong or anything. The main thing is you move away from wherever you're mistreated and you're getting respect, move away right away. That's what I would tell, okay? And then, so we have Ravidasis, okay? A good number of Punjab, it's a big, very successful movement. And then, of course, so many people are with ignorance, they're still in Hinduism, especially if you go to northern India, okay? And how do we address this Buddhism and Babasaheb, right? And with other religions? I find it very, very, struggling to talk about this. It is becoming a sensitive, the religion is becoming a sensitive topic in Ambedkarism. When we want to be truly an Ambedkarite, how do you negotiate that? How do you reconcile? It's a loaded question, but I know you are an expert, so just enlighten us. Yeah, please.
No. This question you are going to face anywhere.
Yeah.
Like if you go to the Telugu speaking land, when I'm talking about the Buddhism coming up, like particularly when I was referring to Maharashtra,
right,
and the parts of UP where you see the proliferation of Buddha Vihar everywhere.
Is it growing in UP?
Yeah.
Oh,
for example,
wonderful.
I was in Delhi, and there were like I was inquiring about the Buddha Vihar, came to know that there are more than 200-300 Buddha Vihar in Delhi itself.
Wonderful.
So what I'm going to, this is a difficult question.
Yeah.
And before we have to go back to the intention of the movement. Okay, so what is the intention of the movement? It is just to, as I told you, you want to call Buddhism a religious movement is a misnomer.
Right.
Okay, what Buddha brought in the world is the system of universal ethics. He was the first to restore the faith in the man.
Right.
To say that, every human being is capable of, looking after himself or herself.
Right.
So the point here is, our people have become Christians. It's not against Christianity.
Right.
What is the point is, how we can have the ethical system that will take into consideration all the people. So what is important here is are we prepared to do the comparative study of the religions? For what? Are we prepared to examine even our own religious ideas, including Buddhism? Isn't it? And with that comparison, try to find out, what will benefit the larger goal of the community. So if our goal is to create a more just society, more equal society, more, a free society, we have to examine all the things, including whatever religions we profess, including Buddhism.
Good.
If we do not have that attitude, for example, we will never be able to, confront the divisions within us. So one of the way Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has tried to resolve it is by, lifting his Buddhist movement above the religions. And making it a kind of, I won't use the word tool because it demeans a system. I would say that he brought into play the Buddha's Dhamma in a way to, as a system which will enable this communication within. So in one way he did, if you go back to what is called the book of his, the Who Were the Untouchables. It is dedicated to 3 saints: Ravidas, Chokha Mela, and Nannar. And what is the gist of it? The gist of that book is that the untouchables were the Buddhists.
Correct.
So if we do not take into consideration this revolution and counter-revolution, that narration of the Indian history is nothing but the history of conflict between Buddhism and Brahmanism. Isn't it? So how do we confront Brahmanism? How do we confront the caste system? How do we confront that ethical system? Can we confront it with Christianity? Can we confront it with Islam? Now, to talk very openly about it, none of their scriptures, has talked about the annihilation of caste. But if you look at the Buddhist scriptures, there are enough in Buddhism which has, counter to the narration of the Brahminical narration.
Mhm.
Isn't it? There is a definite Buddhist philosophical system which has evolved over the period of time, which counters the total Brahminical, hegemonical claim. Like, for example, Vajra Suchi, which was so much, close to Jyotiba Phule, for example. It's a Buddhist text, which, Vajra Suchi is a diamond needle which pricks into the pride of the Brahmins.
Mhm.
So do we have a narration which will counter the Brahminical narrations, the Brahminical stories, the Brahminical myths? How do we puncture that? Can Christianity do it? Can Islam do it? I think these are the questions.
Right.
Isn't it? Can it create an universal ethical system where the relationship between the two humans is important, not a mediated ethical system? Are we prepared to examine those books, the sacred books? You see what I'm trying to get at? These are very difficult questions. These are very touchy questions. I can understand that. But somewhere we have to begin to talk about these questions.
Yes.
Find the safer places where we can talk. And I think Babasaheb Ambedkar is a unifying point. So even if you are a Christian, for you, the rallying point is Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar.
Yeah. That's what, there is no question about Babasaheb reverence, the people adore, irrespective of their religion. So that's a.
And I have never found, the antagonism of a Christian against Dalit Christian against Buddhism.
No.
They will have some reservation because they have no clarity as to why Buddhism, isn't it? Whether they have, this shift in the religion or what. If they understand Babasaheb's, the emancipation project, I don't think that they would have any difficulties in accepting the Buddha and his Dhamma. The point is this dialogue and discussion.
Got it.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And we don't have to convert the people.
Yeah. That's
Isn't
right.
it? We are talking about the methods. We are talking about the marga. If you want your spiritual salvation in some particular thing, but it has no social salvation, because ultimately our salvation is a social salvation as well. How can you be free if at the same time the people around you are not being free?
Right.
So, for example, the concept of Bodhisattva is all about striving for the freedom of others as well.
Right.
Isn't it? So in a way, we have to find out the context, the platforms where we can come together, talk very openly about religions, talk very openly about, even critically examine Babasaheb Ambedkar.
Yes.
I would say, can the Christians create the universal ethics? Can they have the liberation theology? Can the Islam have it? Can the Christianity orient itself towards the vision of Dr. Ambedkar? Or, for example, can the Islam itself reorient itself towards the vision of human rights? I think that's what is needed today.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mangesh ji. So that was there's a lot more debate and discussion and more bringing these together. That's what is important. I agree. Thank you, Priya.
Thanks. We have one more question from Govind. He's asking, there is some ambiguity with the food, like I often see veg, non-veg debate taking place. What were Buddha's thoughts on violence and non-violence food, and how Dr. Ambedkar expanded that view about food further? Kindly throw light on it if you find this question acceptable. Thank you.
See, there is, Govindji, there is no bar on what food you eat. It's your personal choice. It's your cultural choice. What you eat doesn't determine who you are. isn't it? And if your mind is full of compassion, if you don't want to eat animals, that's your personal choice. But you are brought in a culture where it has become the part of your being to eat non-veg. What can you do? So the Buddha has put no premium on special food. The Buddha doesn't say that if you eat this particular food, you will enlighten. That particular food, you are a bad man, isn't it? And there is a very beautiful discussion in Buddha and Dhamma. So some Brahmins claim that because they eat vegetarian food, they are superior. The Buddha said, no, it's not like that, isn't it? So there is no differentiation on the basis of the food you eat, isn't it? Now you have to take the ethical responsibility for what you eat, for example. That's a larger question. What kind of ethical responsibility somebody wants to take? But there is no premium on what food you eat. That's very much made clearly by the Buddha. About the question of violence, the Buddha is, of course, known for his peace and ahimsa. But, there are some cases where, the ahimsa becomes the path, the hinsa becomes the path of your morality. So the question is, if you see somebody is going to push the nuclear button, what are you going to do? Are you going to let them push the nuclear button? Or if you can, stop them from doing it, what would you do? So sometimes there is a need of a force, but the force cannot be permanent. It has to be calculated and it has to be rational. The Buddha never asked the kings to disarm their armies, isn't it? So, there is a beautiful discussion in the Buddha and Dhamma about will to kill and need to kill. So if there is a need to kill, you cannot. You have no choice. But if you are just willing to kill other people, it is not acceptable. So we cannot have in our thought process the violent methods. We have the best methods to transform the world. Right, Govindji?
I'm sure Govindji has convinced with your answer, sir. Thank you. That was a wonderful explanation. I totally agree with that. Next, we have Dr. Poshan with a question. Sir, please go ahead.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Mangesh. I am a staunch admirer of your expertise, particularly on the IADF group, but thank you for that. And also, thank you for referring a nurse, our fellow sister from Nagpur. I think she was studying in London, and I was trying to help her for her placement. That's just a note. And my question is, I just want to see what your thoughts on the thinking of Dr. Babasaheb and two concepts. Number one, political power is the master key,
Yes.
and his way of life is Buddhist path. How can we join or marry together for the modern world for a Buddhist like me? Thank you.
See, the political power is a master key. Is very important to have the access to power for the people. And the political power is not just going to come like this, unless we have some kind of a social and economic power. And the social power lies in the unity, lies in the community, lies in the formation of that solidarity, to use the word. And the bigger question for us is, how do we create that solidarity? And that question has been always there in front of us in the community, even when Babasaheb Ambedkar was alive. And he has tried in various ways to create the platforms which will have that solidarity, to have the access to the political power. And, this is very important in the political democracy, to have access to power. But to have, the power in the parliamentary democracy is very important. But at the same time, what is important is to have the social and, economic power. Now, the question is, do we have a social power? Before that, another term comes the psychological power, the confidence. And if we do not have that confidence, we cannot have the social power. So when I was, talking to Megha, I was actually talking about the confidence in the community. Are we supposed to be at the loggerheads and not, stand up? Are we not supposed to, use the persuasive skills to voice our positions, to challenge, to prick the consciousness of others without, giving rise to violence. And I think that there is a genuine possibility of that to have between the people, human beings. And what happens in the caste system, the lower you go down on this bottom of the caste pyramid, you see that there is no capital, because it's very difficult for, as brother said, Malay and Madigas to work together. Then it's easier for, a Reddy or Kama to work together, or Reddy and Brahmin to work together. Because, the possibility of the social capital increases as you go higher on this caste pyramid. Let's not forget the fact that we are broken people. We are, our humanities are smashed, shattered by the Hindu caste system. Very difficult for us to organize, because this is the very nature of the caste system. So that's why the religion like Buddhism comes into play. Because the first things it teaches is metta. Treat other person as you will treat yourself. How to put that practice, the deep form of democracy, an attitude of respect and reverence for a fellow human being. How do we inculcate that into our communities, that possibilities of loving each other? There is the caste system is a system of hatred. It's a system of contempt. We are millions in number, but we are fractions because of the caste system. So how do we make that fractions into million? That's a big question for us. And I think one of the ways for us is to have this, the religious feeling of treating the fraternity next to God, or even the God itself. The respect and reverence for a fellow human being is just like, the God for us. We cannot tamper with it. We cannot violate it. No, it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of, reflection. It takes a lot of daring to love a human being. Loving other human being is not an easy task. So I think the more we begin to have this, the democracies at the levels of the communities, at the levels of local, on the local levels, the more we begin to have dialogues, the more we begin to have this exchange of views, the more we begin to have the communication between us. I think it will create a solidarity among the communities. And we are seeing that. It is not that we are not seeing why every community, why every party is trying to, rally behind Dr. Ambedkar. They don't love Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. But why? Why they want to put Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar on their posters? Why? Because over the period of time, there is a definite move where the communities all over India are in communication. Venkat, for example, is from Telangana. I am from Maharashtra. You from Karnataka, isn't it? Bhanu is from Andhra Pradesh. We come from all different regions. We sometimes we even don't know what caste we belong to, and it's not needed. It's not necessary. So these processes are happening at micro level. The more they happen, the more we create power within. Why we are not successful? Because, because of the contradiction of the caste. Let's not blame our communities. Let's get hold of new ideas. Let's get hold of new vision. Isn't it? The political power, the political parties will emerge. You look at BSP, what it has done in a short period of time. 4 times becoming a chief minister of a state is itself a miracle. It could happen in the past. It can happen in the future. We keep on striving. We keep on mobilizing. We keep on engaging. If we don't have, if we want me to talk on the communal life, communal lines, the Brahmins were just as segregated as we are today. Brahmin is not a single caste. There are, more than 180 types of Brahmins. But when the British came, they had got this national platform to unite together. Now the so-called Dalits, they are, according to NSSO, 20% of the India's population. 20% of the India's population, if they begin to form even a sense of community, even the sentiment of one community nationwide, what will happen? You just imagine. Right, doctor?
Thank you, Dr. Mangesh. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mangesh ji. Prasanna ji, I'm very sorry. We are running out of time. It's a beautiful question that you have asked, but I don't think so. We have enough time to discuss on this. Very sorry about it.
I will just take 2 minutes because I think Prasanna's question is important.
Okay.
You see, politics is, changes from time to time. And at the time of the Buddha, he has influenced the politics of his period. When Ajashatru's son, Prasannaji's son, was on the war path, the Buddha stopped him 3 times, not to, destroy the Sakyans. 4 times he couldn't do it. But the Buddha himself played a role in, talking about the enlightened politics at the time. And we know Ashoka. There is no emperor ruler like the Ashoka in the world. The way he has benefited through his actions, the larger communities, it's unbelievable. Even today, we are the beneficiaries of Ashoka. The world is indebted to Ashoka. So when we are talking about revolutionary politics, the radical Buddhism is a revolutionary politics itself. When we are talking about equality, when we are talking about fraternity, it's the revolutionary politics. It might not be the electoral politics. When we are talking about the freedom of human being, the freedom of speech, you are already in the realm of some kind of a revolution, aren't we? Prasanna.
Yes, sir.
So I think we have to play that role today. Buddhism is a revolution, is a peaceful revolution. Even it's a roaring revolution. A free mind is a revolution itself. So thank you, Prasanna. Priya, please take over.
Thank you so much. You very kind of you to answer his question. I'm very thankful for everyone to be here today, and thank you, Mangesh ji, for patiently answering all the questions. And it was a beautiful reply. I totally agree with most of your answers. For me, the take-home message for today's talk is Buddhism is a quest to free the mind. To become a bodhisattva, and religion has to do according to the science. If there is no science, and it makes no sense. So with that, I really thank everybody to be here today, and have a wonderful time.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you all.